You think you know what a gladiator was.
Massive, bloodthirsty, half-naked in the sun, fighting to the death every weekend while 50,000 Romans screamed for more.
You've seen the movies, you've seen the paintings, you've seen Russell Crowe covered in sand and rage.
Here's the thing. Almost none of that is true, and the real version is somehow stranger than the myth. Let's start with the one thing everyone agrees on. Gladiators fought in arenas. That part is correct. Good job. Everything else is negotiable.
The first thing you need to understand is that gladiators were expensive.
Not expensive like a nice car, expensive like a commercial aircraft. A single trained gladiator represented years of food, housing, medical care, and professional coaching.
The lanista, the guy who owned and managed gladiators, spent an enormous amount of money turning a random slave or criminal into something worth watching. So when that investment walked into the arena, the last thing anyone wanted was for him to immediately die. This is not speculation. We have the contracts. Roman arena contracts explicitly outlined compensation that the lanista received if his gladiator was killed during a match.
The fee for a dead gladiator was roughly 100 times the fee for a living one who lost. Let that sink in for a second. Killing the other guy was the expensive option. So what actually happened when two gladiators fought? Mostly theater. Not fake theater, they were absolutely hitting each other with real weapons and real people got genuinely hurt.
But the goal was not death. The goal was a good show. A wounded gladiator on one knee, shield dropped, arm raised. That was the moment the crowd wanted. That was the climax. What happened next was usually up to the crowd and the editor, the Roman official presiding over the games. And here's the part the movies never show you. The crowd usually voted to let the loser live. We know this because we have records of individual gladiators and their fight histories. Some fought dozens of times across years-long careers.
One gladiator named Flamma was offered his freedom 4 separate times after winning fights. He turned it down all 4 times and kept fighting.
Because being a gladiator, for all its obvious downsides, came with fame, food, shelter, and medical care that most Romans could only dream about. Which brings us to the doctors. Gladiators had access to some of the best physicians in the Roman Empire. We know this because one of those physicians left records. His name was Galen. You might know him as one of the most influential medical writers in human history, a guy whose work dominated Western medicine for over 1,000 years. Before he became famous, Galen spent several years as the official physician of a gladiatorial school in Pergamon. He wrote extensively about treating gladiator wounds. He developed surgical techniques working on these men. He figured out how to manage infections, how to close deep cuts, how to keep fighters alive long enough to fight again. Gladiators were functionally the medical research subjects of the ancient world. Their bodies were too valuable to let die from an infected cut. Now, the diet. This is where it gets genuinely weird. In 1993, archaeologists excavating a gladiator cemetery in Ephesus, one of the only confirmed gladiator burial sites ever found, started analyzing the bones. They were looking for clues about how these men lived. What they found did not match the image of blood-soaked carnivores at all. The bone chemistry told a clear story. Gladiators ate mostly barley and beans. Not steak, not wild boar, not whatever heroic meat you're imagining. Barley. And beans. So much barley, in fact, that Roman writers had a nickname for them, hordearii, barley men. Now, before you feel bad for them, there was a reason for this. Barley and legumes are extraordinarily dense in carbohydrates. They build a specific kind of body mass, a layer of subcutaneous fat sitting just beneath the skin over heavily developed muscle. And that layer of fat was not a flaw, it was a feature. In a story where the point is to bleed visibly and dramatically without actually dying, a thick layer of fat means that a sword cut produces an impressive wound that looks terrible and bleeds a lot, but stays well away from the organs underneath. Gladiators were essentially engineering their own bodies to be better entertainment. They were optimizing for looking like they were almost dead without actually being almost dead. So let's put this together. The gladiator you picture, this half-crazed death machine grinding through opponents every week, did not exist.
What actually existed was something closer to a professional wrestler with better PR.
A contracted athlete managed by a promoter, fed a specific diet for performance reasons, patched up by competent doctors after every match, and sent back out into the arena to put on a show that the audience believed was more lethal than it was.
Most gladiators who entered the arena left it alive. Most fights ended in surrender, not death. The ones who did die were usually killed not because the crowd demanded it, but because they had already lost too many times and were no longer worth the cost of keeping alive. Which is cold. Genuinely cold.
The Roman Empire was not a kind place, and we should not romanticize it. But it is not the wall-to-wall bloodbath the movies sold you. Here's the part that should actually bother you.
We have known most of this for decades. The contracts exist. The bones exist. Galen's writings exist. The fight records exist.
And yet, every major gladiator film made in the last 50 years still shows the same thing. Endless death, meat-eating warriors, fights that only end when someone stops breathing. Because the truth, a heavily managed sporting spectacle with a plant-based diet and union-style contracts is apparently not dramatic enough.
The Romans built an entire mythology around these men to make their product more exciting. And then we just kept it going for 2,000 years.
You have to admit, that's a pretty good run for a lie.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please subscribe. If you didn't, that's cool too. Any ideas for future video? Let me know in the comments.